Good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm back for the final workshop on in this Aptos series, a workshop that will be used more broadly than just this session, and also to include general advice that will go on our socials for people building startups. I'm Anthony, the CEO of Encode. We're going to start with a brief recap of what's been covered before, and then go more specifically into some of the topics and advice I have for this workshop. This workshop is actually titled What to Build, which we covered a lot in the last session, but also how to build, how to go about being successful, being a startup within the Aptos ecosystem. We're going to cover this both through the Canva again and also a Miro presentation too. That's the wrong slide. Give me a second. If you have questions, please drop them into the chat. Cool, good. So, for starters, on this session in this series, we looked at the history of Aptos, its progression out of DM, out of Facebook, its intention to be a performance blockchain with using parallel execution, robust consensus, and the Move programming language that I'm sure you are all using. By the way, please do drop into chat what projects you are intending to build in Hackathon. I'm happy to give any direct feedback on those and talk about my specific recommendations that I think would win the Hackathon and be successful. We talked about the pitch being speed, safety, and composability, and also the security aspects of Move itself being statistically typed, formally verified, and inspired by Rust. We talked about digital assets being first-class citizens, known as resources, and then talked about modules and smart contracts within the Aptos ecosystem. This is all on your platform and on your documentation if you want to look at it in more depth. We talked about specific use cases. We're going to go much deeper into the slides. That was the code examples. Specifically DeFi, and the hackathon that's ongoing is specifically aimed at DeFi. We talked about lending use cases and explained why lending is important within a DeFi environment for borrowing, for shorting, and temporary availability of assets. We talked about exchanges and DEXs and trading and AMMs, definitely things you could explore within this event. We talked about staking and liquid staking, both staking to participate in governance, but also staking and then using that stake tokens to do other things within the DeFi realm. Talked about launch pads, which are potentially both things you could build within the hackathon, but also if you are successful, you want to be applying to certain launch pads in order to be successful. Or to help you sort of accelerate your initial launch. We talked about stablecoins, which is one of my big top 3 recommendations of things you should build. A stablecoin with a different monetary environment. I would look at the model of Float protocol, of Reflexer, both projects out of Encode that have been very successful, and more. We're looking for sort of complicated, not complicated, but sophisticated monetary policy designs. Maybe have the underlying capital kept in something which itself has a risk profile, and different risk trading strategies under the hood to change the way the yield the stablecoin generates, and the security the stablecoin has in maintaining a particular price. You could do things like make the moving average, the moving price, or make the price a floating currency that floats in real time, so that maybe at one point it's worth $1.5 and another point it's worth $1.7, a sort of Big Mac index, so to speak. All of these ideas I think would be extremely successful if you were to explore them. We talked about explorers, not something you want to build in the hackathon, but that you should absolutely be using within Aptos. This is all fairly standard. We talked about bridges, complicated, but they do exist. We talked about wallets. We talked about NFTs. We talked about tooling, oracles, gaming, security, social, AI, and more. So my suggestions yesterday were something on the stablecoin side I think could be very successful. I think something in sort of agentic sort of trading strategy similar to Giza, also I think could be extremely successful. Other type things, innovative lending protocols such as similar to Euler. These are all projects out of Encode that have been very successful. I will actually talk about them specifically here. Euler price is one thing. So Euler, named after the mathematician. So what Euler does, it allows you to lend or borrow any asset permissionlessly. Let me share this tab. Please load. So what this means is that for the most popular 10 assets, there's liquid market for them. We have some degree of price confidence. It's easy to kind of simple enough to dictate, to figure out what the interest rate should be and facilitate a market. But for the long tail of assets, this is going to be pretty difficult. It's not going to be so simple as to figure out what the interest rate should be, or even to provide a market for them. And Euler does that. Its innovation is around particularly the calculation of an interest rate. So you can have many different markets created. Something similar on Aptos, I think, would do particularly well. In terms of stablecoins design, I would advocate something like Float Protocol. Maybe it's not still online. No, it's not. So Float Protocol. See if I can find the old medium. There we go. There we go. I want to. This is a really good article that explains the difference between Float and other protocols. I'm actually going to put it into chat here. I recommend, if you're doing a stablecoin design, look, Fei was also another stablecoin that did well for a time, then failed. 100% look into these three protocols. This goes into complicated sort of explanation about how expansions of the supply would work. Typically for an algorithmic stablecoin, when the price is below peg, you want to sell some of your treasury and buy, or sort of a treasury you have, to buy the token, to push it back up, buy the stablecoin to try and make the price go back up to the stable price, or the price aimed at. Simple example, if USDC was at $1 and it went down to 0.9, what they could do, it's not their mechanism, what they could do is go and buy up all of the USDC at 0.9 until the price returns to $1. Similarly, if price is above peg, there's too much demand for a stable coin, it's at 1.1, you want to sell enough supply, about 10%, mint new supply, sell supply, and move it down to $1. That's also a profit event that you can use to increase your treasury for rainy days. You can then have sort of different ways of kind of collateralizing your treasury, and then obviously you're going to get an interest rate or sort of profit that can be used to go into a sort of secondary token. In the case of Float, there was Float and Bank. Float's the stablecoin, Bank was the kind of profit token, so to speak. So definitely something around the stablecoins is something I very much recommend. The next protocol to look into is Giza. So this allows for the autonomous creating of agent-enabling markets. So basically, trading strategies, algorithmic agents that are trading and executing DeFi strategies on your behalf. So I definitely think something like this, and then the Aptos Hackathon could do extremely well. Giza have been very successful. You could copy some of the Armor stuff, for instance, and add a particular innovation, write it and move, etc. I think it would do excellently. So there's sort of three good ideas: long tail lending from Euler, agentic sort of trading strategies of Giza, or stablecoin design like Float. I highly recommend you do one of those. I think it executes to a good degree, and using sort of AI tools, your cursors, your Geminis under the hood, your whatever model of choice and coding agents, you could do very well, particularly in the front end. So that's my first bit of my talk, is to clarify some of the things we talked about yesterday, give you some very specific recommendations for the hackathon, and now I'm going to give you some more general advice about founding a startup in Web3. I call this my sort of first time fundraising talk. Some of you may have heard it before, and there's a few sort of nuggets in here that I think are very important when going from hackathon to post-hackathon. So let's go through it. Let's check the chats. Looking good. Okay, so the first thing is most people don't really know how fundraising works in Web3. This isn't a fundraising talk, so I'm not going to go through it in depth, but except to make a few general comments. One is that I would say it's easier to raise in Web3 than outside of Web3. That's because of the liquidity factor that's involved in. Let's see if I got the specific bit of the slide. There we go. The liquidity factor that goes on Web3, that you have a token which not only represents is sort of like a stock or share, but has some sort of valuable use case that people need to buy it for within a network. So liquidity, in all cases, your downside risk is probably not zero. So your upside is quite high. And typically a token, as part of being a fundamental part of the product that people are creating, it also is going to be released much earlier in a liquid form than a typical stock and share. So this means that there is a large incentive for investors to bid up the price of Web3 startups, but also find you, which goes to my sort of first major advice for the hackathon, which is particularly because fundraising or winning prizes is kind of the same thing. This heuristic is very important. Your inbound should be greater than your outbound. The interest you're attracting from judges in the hackathon or Aptos in general, or people looking around, if that is outstripping the work you're doing to outreach to people, you're sort of winning here. This is really good. So that's the first thing to say. Your inbound should be greater than your outbound. Please, when you're designing your projects, don't think about tokens or anything like that. That's not needed. But we do want a very compelling front-end product. We do want to not overpromise on what it can do. Don't think about token structures at all, but make a product that is clearly has commercial attention and potential. And the way I think to do that is to look at is to try and copy some of the more successful strategies in other chains and see how you could bring it within the Move environment and evolve it. Intros isn't relevant, valuations. This is very important, I think, during the hackathon, but also people kind of forget the immediate progression afterwards. You're approaching this hackathon to get careers, maybe start a company, maybe evolve the project you're working on. So please keep progressing after the event, under promise, over deliver. You're going to have the opportunity to talk directly with the Aptos team, almost certainly, minimally the judges. So you want to be showing a consistent rate of improvement. We don't need to talk about that so much. I think it would be valuable for you within your project to try and create urgency and scarcity by sort of talking about how you would launch the project and be very aggressive with your rate of progress immediately after the hackathon if you do have the thoughts of doing it. And then what else was I going to say? No, this is not super relevant. We're not going to talk about vesting. I am not going to talk so much about that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the startup method. Nice. Okay, so a few other things I want to talk about. We call this the Encode startup method. So the first thing to say is that the grit that you show, which is basically measured in hard work, number of opportunities you create for yourself, I think can be evident in hackathon strategies. So you're doing this Aptos hackathon at the moment, or you're thinking about doing it. A reminder, if you haven't already, please register for the Aptos hackathon. I'm going to paste it in here. That is an offshoot of the Educate series we're doing now. So please make sure you do join it. But actually, you want to be participating in as many hackathons as you can within Encode, within the Aptos ecosystem, constantly creating opportunities for yourself, building up your repertoire, hopefully winning prizes. This is measured broadly in three things. One is stamina, two is follow through, and three is resilience. How many times can you keep doing it? And I would try and say as a secret sauce, try and make the extra mile the default. So go the extra step, do the extra work, push harder. It makes the difference. We've already talked about some of the heuristics. We'll come back to them. Please also know the difference between a startup and a business. So a startup, if you're thinking about your hackathon project as such, is something that ultimately is using leveraging capital and tech to build as large a company as possible. And a business is one that is going to prioritize revenue and profit in the short term and sort of medium-term sustainability of the company. A startup can be a business. I think Encode is a good example, and a business can be a startup. But I think it is important to know what you're building. And realistically, in Web3, the startup will be the one with the sort of token potential and is designed as a sort of protocol. Okay, some heuristics. Which heuristics means a rule of thumb. We talked about them before. The first is always show progress, and that silence is death within a hackathon, within your work. If you hear silence, usually nothing is happening. And being attuned to knowing what silence sounds like is important. And usually it's the lack of, you kind of feel it in your soul, so to speak. It's like a negative stimulus, like nothing's happening. What's going on? Sorry, I'm getting a call there. You need to be consistent and genuine. When you're building your project now and future, don't be disingenuous. Don't lie. Keep the rate of progress. Don't try and represent projects that you built a long time ago as new ones, or copy others. If you're copying something and you do it with, be inspired by it. Don't be sort of copying it verbatim. And as I mentioned, be sort of under promising and over delivering as a default. This goes without saying because you're running a hackathon, but or participating in a hackathon, but have a low burn rate as well. Don't overdo it on spending. Don't hire. Your team is already a significant resource, and spend its resources, spend your time resources as the only factor, which also means be default alive. And I think as a hacker, as a developer, it's by consistently doing events and having the free time and financial stability to do hackathon types events, and then afterwards is having a sort of like revenue stream or very low cost base to sort of keep yourself going. Showing determination within a hackathon format, you should be asking all the questions on all the discords, pinging the team, the judges, the mentors, turning up to every workshop. This makes a huge difference. I know from personal experience that it does. Being organized, don't miss the deadlines. I look at the Aptos Hackathon event, we look at it ourselves. Quickly here, there's 22 days to go, plenty of time, and make sure you're sort of doing all the basics of that. Get in well before the submission deadline. That will make you immediately stand out to the partners. Do your due diligence. So let's look at who's judging. I bet we can find out. Does it say? No, but look at the Aptos DevRels. Look at what they've talked about in the workshops. Make sure you've gone back and watched all these workshops. I'm sure you have at all. You have. There's still a couple coming up next week. Particularly the Circle one that could be great for a stablecoin example, or the lending protocol. The office hours go, ask questions. People don't do this shit. I don't know why. Eventually, warm intros and FaceTime eventually, but that's hard. But maybe you could travel to one of the Aptos in-person events in Singapore, in Korea, etc. We've got one in London in a few weeks' time. We'd love to see you at. Cool. Follow up, not so relevant for you guys, and creating urgency, which is create a beautiful thing. And remember that crypto's main use case is still as a casino. So we want to be always leaning into sort of things that have scarcity and short-termism and FOMO as much as possible in our designs, and that ultimately people are looking at the equity and token, particularly token potential, more than your product. So how can this give underlying value back to a token? Why would that token be useful in a stable coin? That's fairly obvious. In lending protocol, how could we potentially fit in a sort of governance token, etc.? Maybe it's for paying fees, maybe it's as the common currency, etc. Cool. We covered quite a lot of ground yesterday, guys. So I'm going to mostly stop there, and with a rallying call that please, you ought to be participating in the hackathon. You ought to be doing well. Please email me personally if I can help on your projects, not just within the hackathon stage, but also for potential startup creation and fundraising, etc. I'd be kind of delighted to help. Otherwise, guys, thank you very much. I have been Anthony. If I just go stop sharing my screen for a second. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.